Millennials felt the iceberg hit, they knew the ship was sinking, and they have found what feels like the ultimate life raft and escape hatch. It was ironically during the Great Recession that Bitcoin was born. If you remember dialing into your first AOL account, frequenting Blockbuster on weekends to pick up these ancient relics.
Now this is a video store.
And using MapQuest to get around in your first car.
Dude, where's my car?
You might be a millennial. The 1990s and early 2000s were milk and honey for us.
When do we get the checks?
And our childhoods were so high-tech. Nintendo 64 and Oregon Trail, burned CDs, and our first texting experiences on flip phones. And then there was choosing which top friends would be featured on MySpace.
Do you know the wounds of adolescence can take years to heal?
Millennials didn't understand it at the time, but our age of innocence coincided with the ushering in of the most important informational age in history, the birth of the internet and the digitization of the world.
With the A and then the ring around it?
Allison, can you explain what internet is?
The future tech oligarchs were born out of software and online technology that would eventually touch every aspect of our lives and businesses and put a computer in all our hands, at times creating a technological divide between old and young.
Today, everybody's spoiled rotten. When I was a boy, we didn't have these video games. We made up our own games, like chew the bark off the tree.
Unconfirmed reports this morning
That a plane.
But the millennial age of innocence would soon be shattered.
That looks like a second plane.
Many in Gen Y were in high school or early college when 9/11 happened, marking what you might call a breaking point from the comfort of ultimate American security to a new era of vulnerability and growing government oversight.
Feet shoulder width apart and have your hands out.
It was the first of several major federal and financial crises millennials would have to endure. And as many embarked on their early careers, we learned the U.S. also wasn't secure against a massive economic bubble burst.
If you are watching us from the last home you'll ever own tonight, consider yourself lucky.
Our deepest vulnerabilities as a nation were soon laid bare in the great financial crisis. And many didn't understand that the government's response to the bubble burst would rob much of the millennial generation of being able to accumulate wealth and financial stability.
Millennials represent the largest percentage of full-time workers in the United States, but since entering the workforce, they've experienced slower economic growth than any other generation before them.
When boomers were the same age as today's millennials, they owned about 20% of the country's wealth. Compare that to about 4% that millennials own today. Many millennials are putting off things like marriage, starting families, and home ownership because it's taking them so much longer than they expected to feel financially secure.
What does that mean? The ultimate compact of any society is that your kids will do better than you, and that ultimate compact in America has been broken.
It's no surprise that millennials often gripe about how easy it was for previous generations to afford buying a home on the income of just one parent, when today you have to work 2, 3, even 4 times as long to afford the same house. Many have become perpetual renters, and a recent survey found that a quarter of millennials live with their parents. And how about student loan debt? Millennials represent the largest load of borrowers, sparking some to cry for loan forgiveness.
If you're under like the age of 40, you've been so screwed, in my opinion, unprecedentedly screwed. And what I mean by that is when you look at the ownership of the equity in the world, it is consolidated into the hands of the few.
Suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar.
The problems began long before millennials were born, but during their coming of age and entry into the working world, America plunged further into excessive borrowing and money printing, stunting economic growth and putting an increasing tab on younger generations. These were the policies put forth by those who made a career out of politics. Millennials felt the iceberg hit, they knew the ship was sinking, and they have found what feels like the ultimate life raft and escape hatch. It was ironically during the Great Recession that Bitcoin was born.
if we were playing Monopoly, there's one player on the board. He already owns all the property. There's a couple dollars sitting in front of the other 3 players' seats. There's nobody sitting in the seats. And the millennials were asked to come up and play the game. And the bank is adding more money into the board. But the way they're doing it is they're giving it to the player that already owns all the equity. This is the life of the millennial. What Bitcoin is the 3 millennials, they flip over the whole table and then they beat the one player who started the game over the head with the table.
Bitcoin is the free market expression of the American ideals millennials grew up enjoying: freedom, individualism, and purity. Just ask Michelle Phan, American YouTuber and millennial makeup mogul who found great success in spite of pressure to follow a more traditional path to financial stability. She embraced the emerging opportunities in online media, eventually stumbling upon Bitcoin to store her newfound wealth.
What I was told I should do was to be a doctor because my parents, they wanted me to have a more stable career, a respected career. And they're a little old school, so they come from a generation of, like either be a lawyer, engineer, doctor. I'm sure you've heard the same, right? Deep down, I didn't want to do it. My intuition told me, Michelle, you don't have to follow this path. There's another path that you can forge for yourself. So it wasn't until later when I was 18, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna take this risk.
The daughter of first-generation Vietnamese immigrants who fled war, Michelle went to art school, but in her spare time started posting beauty and makeup tips on YouTube. She was one of the earliest content creators to gain a massive following on the platform. And her channel took off right as the 2008 housing bubble sent the broader economy into a nosedive. But she managed to forge success in the digital economy, even as many of her millennial peers were struggling to make ends meet. And it was the value of saving her hard-earned money that led her down the Bitcoin rabbit hole.
I think that paranoia of saving taught me to look for new assets and to be paranoid, if that makes sense. So I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for my upbringing because it really just taught me to just not trust in the system. Because literally my parents, after the Vietnam War, they lost everything. Bitcoin made so much sense when I first discovered it. I'm like, this is also the American dream.
Michelle understood from her parents' immigrant experience how the destruction of savings could rock a family, which caused her to seek out hard assets and diversify not just her savings, but also her business's balance sheet. So when the chaos of recent bank runs began, even though she had most of her company's money tied up with Silicon Valley Bank, she remained calm and, like any good Bitcoiner, used it as an opportunity to orange pill her friends.
I was unusually calm about it. And I think it was because I had Bitcoin. I had Bitcoin and it was off the exchange. If I needed to, I could liquidate it and just keep everything running. That's how I see Bitcoin for me personally, is break in case of emergency. Because we have this, we have peace of mind. And I think that peace of mind, money can't buy that.
Peace of mind is what so many millennials are looking for in a highly financialized world where everyone is chasing yield and the game feels rigged from the get-go.
I just got paid this amount and it feels like I can't even buy what I used to buy yesterday because their buying power is getting debased. All the wealth, quote unquote, wealth in the world is in the hands of very few people. And so how can you play that game?
Many have opted out of a broken game and into a new digital network of value creation with well-defined rules but no rulers. Even the millennials who can't agree on other things, from wokeism to conservatism, come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is virtuous, purpose-driven, and necessary. Bitcoin is code, it's math, it's authentic, and if there's one word millennials care about in our culture, it's authenticity. It can lift up a generation from the burden of debt it inherited and build a new economic order on a foundation of freedom, value, and hope.
I feel like for us as millennials, we're very adaptive. We grew up in an age where it was analog technology. We're able to adapt the internet and we're able to adapt mobile phones. We are literally building the future. And we've lived through so many different cycles, the bubbles. We don't want to suffer the same mistake as previous generations.